topic for this program is health, as part of a series of discussions with Richard Kinninger entitled On Becoming an Initiate.
It is required that the great majority of your egoic lessons be learned on the physical plane, and your point of contact with the physical plane is the body which you enter at the beginning of your incarnation and through which you function until you undergo transition. This vehicle must be properly maintained if it is to serve you well. Your body is your way of getting around on the physical plane, and its 5 senses are your way of perceiving the physical world. Built into your brain is everything necessary for attaining psychological health, and thus providing a fully functioning powerhouse for you as an ego to acquire optimum learning and character development during an incarnation. A healthy vehicle and a healthy personality are dependent upon your willingness to develop proper attitudes, good health habits, and emotional maturity. Physical health and mental health are both dependent upon your attitudes. The thoughts upon which you dwell tend to become realities in your environment. Fear and worry about illness do more damage to your vehicle than the disease-producing microbes which normally all of us carry inside our bodies. At any given time, there are many infectious agents in your body which could cause active disease. However, you do not succumb because your body's natural defenses hold these germs in check. A well-nourished body and positive attitudes can ward off any infectious disease. Systemic diseases are either nutritionally or psychogenically caused, and so-called accidental self-injury is also usually psychogenic. Your etheric vital body is created flawless, but a fearful or hypochondriac consciousness about disease actually allows the mind to derange this perfect etheric pattern so that it tends to conform to the ego's negative images. What you fear most comes upon you fastest. There is no possible way that you can improve your perfect vital body, but your continual contemplation of the functioning of any organ eventually interferes with its operation. Fearful, angry thoughts upset the endocrine glands, and the energy flow through the corresponding plexi of the central nervous system becomes imbalanced. This is evident in the disturbed chakras of the vital body. The etheric plane is very susceptible to mind power. For instance, if you believe that a sneeze brought on by a cool breeze is inevitably a prelude to coming down with a cold, then you can be sure you will suffer all the symptoms of a cold after a few such sneezes. However, you don't have to get sick just because you experience some signs of an incipient cold. Your parents, in their loving concern for you when you were a child, probably frequently warned you against going out in the cool autumn air without a sweater or going out in the rain without your galoshes, lest you catch your death of a cold. These statements, of course, were designed to get you to use better judgment in dressing for the elements. But little children believe what they are told by grown-ups, at least at first. If mother says you're going to get sick, you fulfill her expectations subconsciously, and you will continue to do so until your final days 7 decades later, unless you learn that her admonitions were grossly exaggerated. Unfortunately, this form of parental concern actually backfires. The mother instills in her children a disease consciousness, even though she had intended to protect them from getting ill. Her child's brain has now been programmed to say, 2 sneezes, I must be catching a cold. My throat feels scratchy, I must be coming down with something. You reinforce this response each time you repeat the affirmation that you are going to get sick, and thus reinforce its negative message upon your brain. And each time you get ill after a scratchy throat or a few sneezes, you can say to yourself, see, I was right. My sore throat was a sign. This kind of thinking, which eventually becomes automatic and unconscious, surely brings about all the feelings of having a cold or other illness. Should the supposed signs of an impending malady occur, you will thereafter manifest the symptoms of the disease, whether you actually have it or not. This phenomenon is well recognized in medical schools, where some students come down with all the symptoms of the disease they are studying without having the germ. People who have been conditioned with a disease consciousness are especially suggestible and suffer needlessly and expensively. Fortunately, this can be programmed out of you. The appearance of the turbinates of the upper nasal passages reveals upon examination whether a person actually has a viral infection or is reacting to allergens. 2 out of 3 persons exhibiting cold symptoms have neither a virus nor allergy to justify their condition. Their suffering is purely psychologically induced, but certainly real and can actually be fatal. Practicing physicians have learned they have to read what disease is being reviewed and described in each month's issue of the Reader's Digest magazine so they can be prepared for the rush of patients suffering from it. But it really doesn't have to be this way. What your mind can cause, it can also prevent. A hypnotist can induce any set of symptoms he commands in a subject, even rashes mimicking measles or acne, in a matter of minutes. Everyone can do the same things to himself through autosuggestion unawares. A person can undo real disease in himself the same way. Far better to reprogram your attitudes toward disease so that you never get sick in the first place. But many people, whether consciously or subconsciously, get sick in order to avoid responsibilities and obligations. Therefore, you have to first root out tendencies to use illness as a crutch. The happy, healthy person has the enthusiasm and energy to tackle and overcome directly the challenges in his life. Developing a health consciousness is accomplished the same way as a disease consciousness, through affirmations directed to your subconscious midbrain for it to carry out automatically. Fear of becoming ill is in itself a precipitative cause of illness. Hypochondria tends to be self-fulfilling. It has been observed that workers who dread the possibility of losing wages due to illness have less incidence of time off due to sickness when the security of being put on salary or health insurance relieves the need for such fears. God doesn't make errors. He didn't intend that you ever be sick, and our angelic creators have endowed everyone with an absolutely perfect vital body so that our bodies can perform perfectly for a lifetime. But man has the power of mind, and he can affect his vital body negatively through fear, worry, stress, anger, and negative apprehensions. However, love, faith, self-esteem, and knowledge that you are in control of yourself and your life circumstances can overcome these negative attitudes. Although your mind can negatively influence your vital body, you cannot, on the other hand, make your vital body better than perfect. The vital body will return to its normal perfection whenever you eliminate negative attitudes about yourself and your health from your habits of thinking. Recently developed feedback techniques designed to seize conscious control of one's autonomic body functions like blood pressure and stomach storms in ulcer patients are self-defeating in the long run. To interfere with such automatic activities can only disrupt them. It is wiser to correct the underlying psychogenic causes of these neurological dysfunctions. It can be seen that the human body is very much subject to thoughts being the cause of disease. But it is also important that the body receive proper food and hygienic maintenance. If you don't supply your body with its physical needs, it will fall into disrepair and become virtually useless to you, and possibly a source of pain and despair. You are responsible for your vehicle, and there is only you to see to it that it gets adequate food, rest, and exercise. Perhaps no other topic raises as much controversy as that of diet. Different people have different views and personal experience as to what constitutes a balanced intake and how food should be prepared. This suggests that perhaps there is no ideal diet, inasmuch as everyone's metabolism and body chemistry differs. What is one person's healthful diet may be a disaster for another. Although there is no universally optimum diet, there are certain guides which should be followed to avoid placing an unnecessary strain on your body. Unquestionably, everyone needs vitamins, minerals, calories, and roughage in order to build and maintain health and vitality. Your body can be no better than the materials you put into it. Therefore, consume wholesome, natural, nutritious, and pure foods as they provide the best building material for your vehicle. A balanced diet in moderate quantity is optimum. Few of us in these modern times work at jobs strenuous enough to burn up all the calories we would have to consume in order to get our minimum daily requirement of vitamins and minerals from all natural foods. I recommend that everyone, including infants, take a balanced supplement of vitamins and minerals daily. As a matter of fact, vitamins taken in pill form are cheaper than the cost of the equivalent food. Of course, you should not try to eliminate natural food, since there are essential nutritional factors which are not available in the purified concentrates. Minerals which are critical to health, but which have long ago been leached out of the soil by millennia of rainfall, have to be made up by having some plant or animal foods from the oceans as part of your diet. Dozens of elements required in trace quantities are nevertheless absolutely vital to sustaining the health of plants, animals, and human bodies. Yet even organic gardening cannot replenish the soil with these trace minerals because the natural fertilizers being plowed back in never contained them. Sea animals do not become diseased. Only land animals do. That is because the sea animals have available to them all the nutriments their bodies, and human bodies, were designed to need. Vitamin pills cannot replace the myriad enzymes and as yet unidentified factors available only in animal meats, and particularly animal organs. Human bodies were designed to eat meat because early man needed animals for food during the seasons when plants and fruits were unavailable for gathering. Animals represented the only fresh food source during winter months. Moreover, animals convert plants inedible to man into valuable meat. Infants who do not receive abundant animal protein during the first 2 years of life suffer permanently from deficient brain and nerve development. The human neurological system does not produce new nerve cells ever again after the first 2 years, and never again in one's life will the demand for animal protein be so critical for the development of intelligence. Even the birds, which when mature eat nothing but grains, feed their young exclusively an insect diet to provide high animal protein. Proper nutrition is essential for lifelong health. Positive mental attitudes cannot overcome one's lack of essential building materials. The sciences recognize that most mental deficiencies and bodily diseases are nutritionally related. Physicians are naturally disease-oriented and find that their interest lies in abnormalities rather than prevention of disease, other than with dramatic procedures producing immediate results for which they can claim clear-cut responsibility and thus get paid for. Therefore, doctors do not much emphasize or even recognize the slow deterioration of health as due to deficient diet. Just because you leave the dinner table literally stuffed does not necessarily mean that you are getting all the nutritive factors in sufficient quantity for operating your body properly. The responsibility for studying nutrition rests upon your shoulders and not your physician's. It's your life, so you had better look to making it more abundant and enjoyable in living it. It is unfortunate that people are so out of touch with their own bodies that they can't perceive the destructive effects of certain habits upon their physiology. There is, of course, a certain percentage of people who are self-destructive by choice. Be that as it may, I still have to tell people to avoid nicotine and caffeine. These alkaloids lead to the syndrome of cigarette, coffee, sugar interdependence, and consequent hormonal imbalances which produce chronic fatigue that seems to be temporarily lifted by a boost from the very same substances which cause it in the first place. We become addicted to high concentrations of sugar as children, and almost all the soft drinks are laced with added caffeine as a stimulant. Children are frequently hyperactive because of the heavy doses of sugar in most items of their diet. Just about all snack foods are loaded with salt, and as a result, children too have a very high incidence of high blood pressure, which can have fatal consequences in early adulthood. Of course, salt and sugar in overabundance are present in prepared foods, ranging from cans of baby food on through to the typically attractive junk foods of which Americans eat too much. Quality wine and beer are good foods and can be enjoyed, provided you do not overindulge to the point of becoming tipsy or drowsy. When that happens, you have caused permanent brain damage. Even though you may kill off only 100 or a dozen brain cells, you can thus permanently interrupt the memory pathways to important knowledge and intelligent functioning. Any time that alcohol consumption results in your being able to detect even slight effects from it, you are detracting from egoic advancement, since that depends upon keen brain functioning. Your body needs adequate rest at the end of the day. Your ego, in the process of directing your body, places a great deal of strain on it. Your body needs to be separated from the ego for a time sufficient to allow the physical vehicle to regenerate itself, and so the body is designed to throw off the ego's demands upon it once a day for 6 or 7 hours. Although you need adequate rest, the amount of sleep needed varies from individual to individual. Some people require 8 hours a night, and others only 6. Scientists have shown that when sleep is habitually disturbed, particularly during dream periods with rapid eye movement, a person tends to become irritable and nervous and can eventually come to behave psychotically. Even though you can stay unconscious in a noisy environment, you cannot get a deep sleep which provides full rest. Part of your brain is constantly identifying and analyzing the possible threat in those noises, and frequently calls upon the ego to pass judgment on them, and a twilight consciousness results. Sufficient sleep is essential to your emotional well-being, as well as your ability to function effectively and alertly day by day. It is important for your physical and mental health to move to peaceful surroundings if you do not enjoy them already. In addition to a proper diet and rest, your body requires exercise in order to retain its tone and vigor. Muscles that are not used tend to atrophy, whereas exercise keeps the muscles healthy. The best exercise is physical work and regular activity and walking. Your heart and arteries are really muscles. It is noteworthy that persons who are physically active tend to flex and strengthen the cardiovascular system so that restriction of blood flow does not occur in later years, and so the brain and heart remain well oxygenated, thus assuring greatly reduced risk of stroke and heart disease. Use good judgment and intelligent care in maintaining your vehicle. You as an ego are immortal, but your body has to be taken care of so it will serve you effectively for a century or so. Your emotions have a profound effect upon your health. Fear, anxiety, and unresolved conflicts can produce a sustained bodily state of fight or flight readiness. If your fears are primarily of psychological origin, that is, without reasonable objective cause, then your body may remain needlessly in a state of continual hypertension. Whenever you are chronically tense about your life situations, or something external threatens your internal stability, you defend yourself by creating, as it were, a wall between you and these painful circumstances. This wall can be your muscles. When you are trying to cope with an unpleasant situation, such as a scolding from your parents as a child, or verbal abuse from your boss or spouse, you do so by tensing up and becoming rigid. By this subconscious device, you slow down your breathing and limit the oxygen reaching your brain. Thereby you insulate yourself from your threatening external world, but that becomes a lifelong habit of suppressing your feelings and restricting the amount of external stimuli that reaches your consciousness. Your muscles, nerves, and brain are like recording devices. Stimuli travel inward, and your responses flow outward through your body. Traumatic experiences, particularly repeated threatening situations, tend to lock tension into your body. In your efforts to insulate yourself from a hostile environment, you create muscular armorings. These muscle tensions linger long after the initial threats subside and form in groupings which will affect your posture, breathing, circulation, and energy flow, all of which are detrimental to your health, your ability to live your life effectively, and be in touch with your own feelings. By self-analysis, you can release the psychic charge behind such armorings. The whole body is a memory device, not just the brain. Fixations and blockages stem from the entire body rather than being a purely psychological problem. It is up to you to uncover the causes and find the solutions to the ineffective and unsatisfying ways you respond to people and life in general. This requires much reading in psychology to learn how your brain operates and what kinds of events in your past have erected barriers to your present conscious awareness of why you respond poorly to events in your environment. In order to be an effective parent, it is imperative that you study child psychology so you do not pass along to your children the chronic insanities of our culture. Mankind will never progress until we adults interrupt the centuries-long chain of madness that has been instilled in each succeeding generation to make us so murderous, aggressive, hostile, and appallingly unfulfilled and unhappy. War, famine, disease, and insanity are exclusively caused by man on this planet. Permanent elimination of these tragedies must come from everyone's recognition of their subtle roots in our tradition of child-rearing. Since the only person over whom you have any real control is you, this means that you have to do your part to learn and overcome the ignorance in your own perceptions of the workings of human psychology. Proper sexual functioning is also essential for health. We human beings have had the sex urge built into us by our creators in order to serve several purposes. For procreation, to balance certain bodily energies on both the physical and etheric levels, and to socialize the race. Your body is like a capacitor, building up and holding charges of energy. All things in nature tend toward a state of balance, and your body is no exception. Certain buildups of energy are released beneficially through sexual orgasm, but all too many people are blocked from effectual orgasmic release by muscular armorings and psychological fixations. Each of us is so imbued with myths, fears, and irrational beliefs about sex that few of us experience the full benefits of sexual climax, let alone full orgasm. The capacity for proper sexual functioning, provided one does not have a physiological problem, is something we are all born with. Yet, as we grow up and are warped by parents, institutions, and a society which is thoroughly baffled about the value and purpose of sex, we lose our ability to function naturally. Again, there is only one person who can unravel the complications that may exist in the area of your own sexual self-realization, and that person is you. The availability of legitimate, authoritative literature on the subject allows no excuse for continued unawareness that may exist on your part. Instead, we are consciously pursuing a balanced philosophy, wherein each individual may arrive at a point whereby he can express his or her sexuality in a mature and healthy manner, and thereby find the font of love, creativeness, and serenity intended by our creators. The people of Stel recognize that it may take several generations of effort to regain the atmosphere conducive to full human self-actualization that we enjoyed as a race in ancient Lemuria. We can never enter into a discussion of mental and physical health without returning to the important theme of self-esteem, because the person with a high sense of self-esteem tends to create a healthy, effectual environment for himself. A person with a deficient sense of self-esteem or self-worth tends to belittle all that he does. He creates maladaptive and useless thought patterns which tend to degrade him. If you think that you deserve to be ill or deserve to suffer emotionally because you believe you need to be punished or are unworthy, then your powers of mental precipitation will bring these images into living reality. If you think well of yourself and believe that you deserve all the blessings which life and God have to offer you, then that shall come to be yours. Good physical health really starts in your head. Your emotions and beliefs affect your functioning. Your decisions to maintain your vehicle through proper diet, exercise, and rest stem from attitudes which foster those decisions. In actuality, you can be as healthy as you want, but it is up to you to employ your mind to that end. Keep your body in good shape because you are going to need it in order to perform on the physical plane where most of the experiences you need for soul growth will be encountered. Are there any questions?
I have a cold sore that keeps reoccurring 2 or 3 times a year. How can I trace back to what's really causing it? I clean up my diet and it still keeps reoccurring, so I suspect it's a mental thing.
I agree that it probably has to do with what you expect. It may be an I've always had them, so I'll always get them kind of attitude.
How can I turn that around?
The trick is to convince your midbrain that you are not going to get cold sores anymore. Everyone carries the herpes simplex virus which causes cold sores, but obviously not everyone gets an eruption on a lip during a cold. You must visualize yourself without a cold sore and repeatedly affirm that it is going away, never to return. Your midbrain will carry out the intentions and visualizations it picks up from your conscious thinking. After you have reprogrammed your midbrain, it is then important that you not allow yourself to think about cold sores in any way ever again. The midbrain subconsciously carries out all of the things that you command your body to do. Let's say that you are playing baseball and you want to swing the bat in such a way that you will strike the ball so it goes in a specific direction. There is no way that you could think through the literally hundreds of thousands of messages that have to be sent to every muscle in turn that is involved in the operation. Coordinating the commands between eye and body is so fantastically complex that it would take a computer study just to trace what happens in about 1/10 of a second inside the midbrain. It carries out your visualization of hitting the ball and can actually put it where you wanted it to go. You have to practice because repetitive reinforcement of skills enhances the results you get. But after a while, the best results are obtained by not attempting any conscious direction of such skills. Your consciousness only gets in the way of your midbrain's virtually flawless functioning. The midbrain just takes over automatically to execute the messages you impress on it. Anything having to do with physical skills, body states, and mental precipitation is carried out by the marvelous midbrain. By constantly telling yourself that you don't have cold sores and that you are healthy, your midbrain accommodates to this idea. And you must never go back to your old patterns of thinking because that could reactivate a whole set of old channels. Whenever the temperature drops 15 degrees Fahrenheit in the space of a few hours, almost everybody gets a scratchy throat. It is built into all of us physiologically for that to happen. But it doesn't follow that you are going to get a sore throat or a cold unless you are programmed to believe that.
I take a little different tack that really works for me. I talk to my subconscious and say, I don't need this anymore, so be gone. Rather than saying that it is not happening, I do this conversation, and it works.
Well, it should work. That is why some people say that the unwanted condition is now departing and is never going to return. People find it too difficult to say, I don't have it, when obviously they do have it. So they just say it is leaving and it is never going to come back again. That is an affirmation. Your midbrain operates on signals which you give it, and you do it all to yourself. In the same vein, I believe that eating special health foods is as effective as your attitude about taking them. If you believe the food is doing you a lot of good, and you visualize yourself becoming glowingly healthy, then those visualizations have more power than the food itself. Indeed, such attitudes extended to ordinary fresh grocery items work just as effectively as with so-called health foods, and for less money. Of course, the best of attitudes cannot create essential nutriments, nor can your food override poor attitudes. Both are needed for optimum health.
What about being exposed to contagious disease?
Well, if you give animals an injection of live germs, they always come down with a disease. If you give a human being such an injection, he may come down with a disease or not, depending upon his attitude. So the germ theory of disease is not absolute for human beings, since man's mind has the very evident ability to overcome the effects of these germs. The mind is a powerful tool, yet most of us don't believe or expect all the things that it can do, so we don't even try them.
This reminds me of your recommendation years ago that we allow a child's body to determine how much sleep or what kind of food he should get. I think that concept is valuable as long as the parents provide a good, balanced selection of foods so that what the child has to choose from would be appropriate and adequate. What do you think of that now?
I still believe that, and I have personally observed it work effectively in detail with my own child. Sometimes children will just go on a binge and all they want to eat is fruit. Then the next week all they want is meat. The week after that it could be vegetables and cheese. Over a period of a month or so, the child would eat all of the things his body needs in proper proportion. Regardless, I am convinced that children require vitamin and mineral supplements.
Why do only land animals and plants get diseased?
Because the microminerals are so very badly depleted on the land surfaces of the world. Animals should not get sick because the defense mechanisms built into them should be able to handle anything that comes their way. A plant that has all the minerals, water, and sunshine that it needs is almost impervious to attack from viruses and insects. It seems like the healthier plants would be the ones that insects would prefer to eat, but for some reason the insects don't. They always pick the weak plants to devour first. Insects were probably designed to clear up the garbage and leave the good parts of the crop for people to eat.
How much influence does karma have on disease, especially in young children?
That certainly is a factor. How severe it is going to be is something that can be modified positively by the parents and also by the attitudes they instill in their child. Of course, if an incoming ego wants to be certain that he is going to have a disability of some special kind to work through, then he makes the changes in the fetus before he incarnates in that baby body. That way, the defect is largely irreversible.
Then it is the ego himself that makes the modification in the fetus.
Right? He is the only one that is allowed to do so. Once the egg has been fertilized by the sperm, then that is that ego's body. He is able to mentally manipulate his vital body as it grows through the fetal stages on the etheric level and causes the physical body to take form upon its framework.
Since an incoming ego can decide that it wants a certain kind of body and can affect the fetus as it develops, what difference does it make what the mother does?
Well, she is the food source and the fetal environment.
Would he know that she is going to take the precautions to watch her nutrition and avoid harmful drugs and cigarettes and so forth?
Yes, and if something goes wrong, he can abandon the project and the fetus will abort.
Where does the free will of the mother come in? She might just as easily assume that it is all being taken care of on the astral by someone else.
Well, he can't feed himself from up there. There are many negative and positive influences which the pregnant woman's actions can produce, some of which can really foul things up for a newborn's chances and even his whole incarnation. It behooves all of us to do the very best we can for each new little one, so that the best is done for us in our next incarnation. There is really a karmic liability for not doing the optimum possible for each incoming ego. Woman just can't say to herself with impunity, well, this kid is probably incarnating to suffer because I'm not eating properly, I'm continuing to smoke during the pregnancy, and I like to get bombed to take my mind off the pregnancy. She can't do that kind of thing without actually harming the baby-to-be. Most babies come out alive, but the incidence of physical and mental impairment is getting staggering.
Doesn't that baby's ego take into account the risks involved?
Yes, he understands what kind of problems that he is going to be dealing with. If you want to incarnate at this particular time, then you have to take what is available. If you are qualified to incarnate into the nation of God, then you wait until everybody is more enlightened so that you have every chance possible. He doesn't have to incarnate now. There is nobody on the astral plane forcing him.
Seems like a woman would be determining the quality of the child she was going to have by the care and forethought she takes.
Well, certainly. And also what that baby is going to be as a human being and all of the bodily equipment that he will have to operate with in order to reach initiation.
It seems like in the case of a mother trying to decide how to consider free will versus the prearrangements of the ego coming in, she can assume that her free will is limited in some degree by already known events of the future. But since she isn't consciously aware of these, the only safe approach she could take is to do the best she can for her baby. But still, there may be some instances which would limit her free will, like an economic collapse so she couldn't get vitamins at the drugstore.
Well, such things obviously are beyond her control. Her baby is counting on her doing her part, so she should see to it that the things under her care and control are taken care of optimally.
I've been reading about character armoring and how a person's hang-ups affect his musculature. Some of the therapies seem pretty extreme, such as painful kneading of muscles, as a means of obtaining psychological releases. Is that the only way?
No, there are other means by which it can be done. Physical manipulation happens to be a shortcut, and clinically it was a very valuable observation that helped determine how people get into neurotic syndromes. To crank away at somebody's muscles until he is really screaming and suddenly have the cause for those tied-up muscles be remembered by the patient is a form of discharge therapy. The patient can experience violent rage or terror in the process of discharging his feelings about whatever it was that caused the muscular armorings. After that, those particular muscles aren't ever tied up again, and the person can operate more effectively psychologically in the related life situations. That block simply has been dissolved. There are gentler methods of getting the same results, but they take longer. Really, you can be your own best therapist if you learn the technique of gradually peeling the onion by going back and back until you can bring to the surface the original causes of your buried grief, fear, resentment, or anger. If there is anything in your life to which you don't seem to make appropriate responses, or which you don't seem to be handling in ways as effective as you see other people doing, then you should start asking yourself, why am I making those unsatisfactory responses? You may realize that it was the same way you responded when you were in college, and this can then open the door to your remembering incidences which show that you responded the same way during your high school days. This is part of the process of consciously going backward through a memory chain of related occurrences to eventually get back to the primary cause which may have occurred when you were a very small child. Each time you uncover one of these incidences, you must relive your feelings about it and be prepared to explore your feelings associated with it to full depth. People are often afraid to plumb their emotions for fear that they may be swept into a bottomless abyss, and this anxiety about not being able to control or come back from such exploration causes them to shut up their feelings and block them out of awareness, where, as it turns out, those feelings do even more mischief in their subconscious mind. But emotions never overwhelm us if we deal with them openly and squarely. Emotions are what make us human. Experiencing them is important, and we must learn to deal with them openly and to accept them. By spending an hour alone in your room to explore your erstwhile immature responses in the light of your present adult understanding is very rewarding. After each such emotional reliving of a suppressed response, you will find that the prior event related to it will just pop up out of your memory at some odd moment a day or a month later. Then that event must be relived the same way. It may take a couple of years of intermittent retrospection, but finally you will get back to the event that originally started your problem. Then when you emotionally discharge that last one, your fixation is all over with. It just dissolves almost as if by magic. All that any psychotherapist can hope for is that you get back to prime causes so that you can review them, relive them, and discharge the bound-up emotions surrounding them. Then he helps you put it all in proper perspective. The long-concealed problem leaves in a miraculous and dramatic moment. However, you can do it yourself, much cheaper, and without the danger of having a psychiatrist's possibly erroneous interpretations put upon you.
Is just being made aware of that prime cause all that's necessary to achieve the permanent discharge?
Just being aware of it is not totally the answer. You have to think about it. What you were afraid of as a child, or what you thought then was naughty, or what you regarded as unbearably embarrassing, can, upon adult review, now be seen as quite acceptable. Children make strange interpretation of what goes on around them, or what adults mean by their scoldings and punishments.
I was just wondering about these character armorings. If an individual manages to uncover a prime cause for a neuroses, aren't there a lot of emotional habits, thought patterns, and defense mechanisms built up over the years that have to be restructured if there's going to be a complete resolution to his problem?
Certainly, but that goes on all the time in all of us. As you accommodate to new points in your philosophy, you have to adjust just about everything that you believe and do in order to match that philosophy. All growth requires that you have the courage to let go of formerly secure but outgrown anchors before you can reach upward. Every time you change any aspect of your personality, you have to shuffle and rebalance all the other comfortable habits and character traits that make up the whole you. I have been talking here about uncovering some submerged factors which may be tying you up, which you can't otherwise penetrate. Then when you get to the key, the problem disappears just as if it never was.
The individual probably experiences a lot of renewed energy.
Right? While you have one set of muscles pulling against another set of muscles, you are all worn out without having accomplished anything. People who have these muscular armorings will have constantly recurring pain in their back, abdomen, neck, or legs that they just can't put any cause to. We as parents should avoid terrorizing our children so that they do not have to defend themselves with such armorings and blocking of emotional memories. Can you imagine the terror a tiny child must feel when a huge adult angrily swats him on the behind so hard that it hurts terribly, and that the person doing it to him is someone upon whom he is totally dependent, who is showing signs of abandoning him and possibly doing him in? That is terrifying. The child then behaves better because he can't operate at all. He is just totally confused. Tiny children are no more responsible than puppies. What pops into their heads is a good idea they put into action. They don't evaluate it as right or wrong or irritating or naughty. They really don't relate the punishment to the cause either. They regard the scolding or spanking as something which just comes out of the blue. It's mysterious and unpredictable to them. We adults unfairly assign motives to children's actions which simply aren't in their heads. They aren't being evil, challenging to your authority, or purposely mischievous. Punishment that is repeated over and over becomes a system against which the child's brain and body will do whatever is possible to protect him. That is where muscular armorings can begin.
There's been a lot of talk recently about biorhythms. On certain days, cyclical energy levels are supposed to be up or down. How do you view that?
Psychologists are always looking for predictive tools, but their exhaustive and hopeful efforts to verify correlation between biorhythm charting and actual performance or emotional states of the subjects whom they tested turned out to be non-predictive. There may be an autosuggestive aspect so far as adherence to the biorhythm idea are concerned, but double-blind testing showed no improvement in that system over pure chance.
What about your mind slowing down as you grow older? Do you think that is a fallacy?
A person who doesn't get proper exercise and eats foods that are too loaded with heavy fats is just allowing the blood vessels through which his blood has to travel in the brain to become narrowed and thus less able to carry oxygen and other nutriments. As soon as brain tissue becomes malnourished, it does not function as it should and can die.
Then that could happen at age 25.
Yes, it could.
So you really shouldn't connect those things with old age.
Well, such conditions are certainly more prevalent in old age. I've known people who could hardly make it to the door at age 60, and yet others who were as spry as sparrows well into their 90s. I'm much impressed with the fact that people who are very active mentally always seem to stay physically young as well as mentally young. So one's attitudes and interests have an important bearing on the physical brain. As one grows elderly, the functioning of one's egoic mind becomes less dependent upon brain limitations and seems to be preparing for a return to disembodied functioning upon transition. Are there any further questions? No? Well, that concludes this session.